In here, we're about to go into our next session called The Power of an Outsider, Harnessing Your Difference for Success. Now, can we have a round of applause for our next panelist, please? Can I welcome Dom Scott, Managing Director at Lifetime Connect, Carl Chiari, Head of Change and Transformation, UK Business Consulting Services at Capco. Come on, let's keep clapping. Let's keep clapping as they walk on. Samuel Kasumu, co-founder of Inclusive Boards, and Kenny Imafidon, co-founder and managing director of Clearview Research Limited.
Fantastic, thank you. So welcome to the Power of an Outsider session. And this is all about harnessing your difference for success. And I'm a big fan of this particular topic. I think it speaks to the very essence of the BYP. You know, all of us are used to operating in spaces where people don't necessarily look like us or sound like us. And we have a choice when that happens to either contract and let that shrivel our spirit and our character and our sense of purpose, or we can elaborate into that and use it as an opportunity to drive our success and create some value. And all of us will be somewhere on the spectrum. And the purpose of this session is to work out where you are on that spectrum and then move the dial into the direction of embracing your uniqueness and creating that value. So we've got a fantastic panel of experts on this topic. Let's kick off by asking each of them to tell us a bit more about themselves and why they're qualified to speak in this area. Samuel, why don't you begin?
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to need a lot of feedback today. Good afternoon, everyone. Awesome. So yeah, my name is Samuel Kasumu. I'm a co-founder of an executive search firm called Inclusive Boards, mainly specialized in putting folks on in non-executive positions and public bodies like Royal Board, National Archives, etc. The reason I'm on the panel is because of two things. I think I was also a former special advisor to a prime minister, so I'm a senior advisor in government when I was there. And in addition to that, I've just published a book called The Power of the Outsider. So I'm going to charge BYP for using this this title. And I will be talking about the book after. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'll pause there.
We'll integrate it. Yeah, we'll come to it.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. You all right? Kind of agree with what Sam said. Some more energy. Everyone all right? Yeah, I know we're getting to the end of the day. But yeah, my name's Kenny. I'm the managing director and co-founder at Clearview. So a lot of the work that we do at Clearview is engaging and involving people in research projects, strategy projects, and evaluation and learning. We work with various public bodies as well, government departments, various brands like Uber, Starbucks, Tinder, different people like that. So day to day, that's what I'm about. Outside of that, I've also just recently launched a book called That Peckham Boy, which essentially, amen. But yeah, that essentially talks about my life journey, talking about in relation to how I grew up in Peckham, challenges I navigated, and very much speaks to this theme of the power of an outsider. So yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. And Carl, over to you.
Hi, evening everyone. My name, as you can see, is Carl Chiari. I have a very unique background. So I have a Kenyan father, Trinidadian mother, grew up in Africa, have worked in the UK for over 20 years in financial services, very many different contexts and backgrounds and cultures. I currently head up not just the change and transformation services piece in Capco, but I also manage the go-to-market strategy piece. And we basically cover all across financial services, from cap markets to wealth and asset management, insurance, and retail banking. So I think my unique experience on this is, having been an immigrant to this country, is actually working out how to get to where I've been and to get where I am now and navigating those challenges.
Fantastic. So the first question, I'll just open it up to the panel for whoever wants to jump in, is around misconceptions. When you're operating in the space and you're kind of the odd one out, there aren't many people that look like you, what are the common misconceptions that people tend to have, and then how have you overcome them in your journey?
I'll take this one first because I have the mic. So yeah, so in terms of myself, so kind of links back to when I'm talking about the book and why I wrote it. A key part is that when you come from areas like Peckham, A lot of people have a misconception of, well, not a misconception, it's also partly the truth. It's a very notorious area, let's be honest. You know what I mean? Let's not rebrand yet. But there's a lot of gentrification that is obviously taking place. So obviously there's the Peckham that people know today, that's full of rooftop bars, and I mean, you come there and have a great time, and there's a Peckham growing up that people didn't want to come to. And so that's the Peckham that I know very well, and the Peckham that I grew up in. And I would say that when you come from areas like that, a lot of people may lack confidence to feel like I'll be able to do something with my life, because a lot of people around me, they don't really see, I say, role models around them that are essentially fulfilling their dreams. Not that it's not happening, they just don't really see it. When you don't see it, it's very hard to believe, like, can I actually go and do this? And so for me, I just feel like that's a common misconception, that people genuinely believe because you can't see it also means that's not happening, but it's happening, but a lot of people are just not visible. But then also, secondly, I think another thing which I would say is a misconception is that people being a product of their environment. Just because you grow up in an area and this happens and that happens and there's violence and there's drugs, whatever else there may be there, that now doesn't mean you have to now conform to those things that go on in your area too. So I think a lot of people that say, I've turned out this way because of this area, is very much not true. You actually made your own choices, and everyone has their own agency, and how you turn up is really a choice for you to make and not your area.
A great point, and we should maybe come back to that one, but let's touch on misconceptions again.
So I think for me, one of the first misconceptions that I had to deal with is because I come from Africa, that any experience that I had, whether it was in life or in education, counted for nothing the minute I stepped on these shores. And I had to basically then start again from scratch to basically prove even things like, you know, I can actually speak fluently in English. To being able to articulate a point and actually have a valid opinion. So I think that's one of the first misconceptions. I think the other one is more around the upbringing that I had, particularly if you come from an African background where you're basically told the merit of success is to either become a banker, a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. And what I've had to disprove is that I don't have to be a subject matter expert. I can actually leverage on transferable skills and still make an impact.
And just on that point, is this something you understood and recognized from the beginning, or have you sort of acquired that perspective on your journey?
I think that's a perspective I've acquired, and I think it led me, it helped me to acquire that perspective faster by being exposed to so many different cultures and different ways of working. I mean, London is a melting pot for cultures. So you will come across people from all over the world. And that in itself, if you're brave enough, allows you to challenge your own perceptions about what success looks like. And on what misconceptions you may be having about yourself as well that are limiting you.
Okay, and to you, Samuel.
Yeah, I suppose I'd say two things. One is, one of the misconceptions is that the value that you bring either has to be the same as the value as everybody else, or you might not be valuable in a particular ecosystem. So when I started in Downing Street, I was the only black advisor at the time. I didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge. Working class background, single parent home, social housing. I didn't work for my previous boss. I don't use his name in public because it's quite triggering for some people. But when he was mayor of London, I didn't work for him, etc., etc. As I went in there as very much as an outsider. But what I realized very quickly was because I was different from so many people, the value I brought was also different. So I didn't have to be like everybody else. I needed to understand what I brought to the table, and what people who are different can bring is you can broaden audiences, you can challenge orthodoxy. There's so many things you bring that if you can have the confidence to be yourself, it allows you to even challenge certain stereotypes just by being yourself. And actually, to be honest, one of the greatest examples of someone who goes into spaces being themselves is Kenny. So I think there are increasingly more examples, particularly of young black men who are saying, look, I am who I am and from where I'm from, but I bring something different to the table, and I think that's very, very important.
Sure. So I'm really fascinated by this point where once you achieve a degree of success, not to sort of preach at the generation coming through to say, be your authentic self, because actually on that journey, chances are you've had to be really versatile is probably the easiest way to put it. But when you first entered those spaces, each of you, what were you thinking? I'm trying to hopefully allow the audience to identify with where they are, with where you were however many years ago it happened to be.
Okay, let me kick off with this one. I think one of the things that I found made a big difference is understanding that there's only one me, there'll only ever be one me, and that I have something of value to bring, and that it's not just about the value I bring, is that others in the room will also benefit from what I have. When you own that story, then it becomes very easy for you to be authentic in the spaces that you're navigating. Now, obviously, you have to be conscious about things like situational awareness and emotional intelligence as well. There are certain things you know what to say at what time and when. But for me, I think that's one of the most powerful things. The other thing is around being willing to challenge your own worldview about what success looks like and on what is being modeled as success, and as to whether that itself is the standard for you. So I think that's the other thing. And you have to continually challenge yourself about that and just be authentic to discovering things about yourself that you didn't even know are there.
And for both of you, where was your mindset at the very beginning, and how has that evolved over time?
So in the very beginning, I'd say my mindset was very much, I just had to make it. That was it, really. And no excuses. I think, and I just say that because I think a lot of times you don't actually know what the path is going to be and what's going to be down there when you get there. But the point is you just have to keep moving. And so for me, I've always had to learn, how do I get comfortable and uncomfortable?
Yep.
And a lot of times people are seeking comfort because they want to feel comfortable, but actually you learn after being a while in this game that actually you just have to be comfortable being uncomfortable all the time. And actually, if you're too comfortable, that's probably saying a lot more to you than anything. And so for me, it's learning that about myself and the journey. But then also coming back to what Carl mentioned earlier, just about when he talked about like success and understanding what does that look like, you definitely have to define that for yourself in terms of what works for you. I think until you know that, you can't really count the cost of your decisions on your journey. Because at the end of the day, what might cost too much for me might not cost too much for someone else here. And I think you really have to think about, what's the price you're willing to pay for whatever success you're looking? Because a lot of times people have a real conflicting sense of the price, because a lot of times this stuff looks glamorous. But when you look at a lot of it, is if you don't get excited by doing the basic and the boring things, you will never make it.
Really good advice. And same question for you. Just keen to get a snapshot of your mindset at the beginning of your journey.
Yeah, I've been involved in business and politics since I was 19. But I kind of fell into it because I was involved in student politics, was a sabbatical officer, and engaged with National Union students, etc. So I've been exposed to leadership roles from very young has meant that I've always had this sense of agency and a sense of wanting to be a very influential person, not necessarily having a position, but having the influence. And so I'd also say, if you're relatively entrepreneurial, maybe, and you have entrepreneurial characteristics, it might be a lot easier for you to have that sense of agency. But if you're not, maybe it's a bit more difficult for you to say, well, look, I'm unique and this is what I bring. Yeah. And so it's not a one size fits all. For me, I think it's really important to have a clarity of vision. What is that picture of a desirable future that you think you want to self-actualize? And what is your sense of mission? So what is the purpose for what you bring? And then the confidence has to be there for you to take some risks, and the confidence for you to say, well, actually, I bring something to the table and I need to make sure I do my best to make sure that the world understands the value that I bring.
Sure. There's a really strong theme there of sort of knowing who you are, and also having a strong sense of clarity as to where you want to be, that you can sort of determine how to adapt and what sacrifices to make. I'm also keen just to get a sense of how you've used your uniqueness in sort of specific circumstances to your advantage.
Shall I take this one again? Okay. Right. So I'll cast your minds back to 8 years ago, 2015. It's when I decided I'm going to break out and start a journey of self-employment. I managed to secure a contract with a very big bank, and my first week there were redundancies left, right, and center. The program I was running, there were a lot of cost challenges, and I was thinking, shucks, I've just got in here, and I don't know if I'm going to be next out of the door. And what I then had to do is go back to my childhood days, because I grew up on a farm just outside Nairobi. I used to wake up at 5 in the morning. I'd go to milk the cows. I would go to the farm and get cabbages and tomatoes, go and sell them in the market, and negotiate with traders. And I made relationships that way. So cast my mind now to 2015, that's exactly what I did. I just went and created rapport with decision makers and became an answer to their problems. So I basically asked, what is the problem that you're looking to solve? And I made myself indispensable in that way, in terms of answering their problems. And it all came through rapport and negotiation and building relationships. Suffice to say, I ended up staying there for 2 years, and I was the last guy out of the door. So I guess that's one way that I leveraged my unique experience of selling cabbages in a market to speaking to traders and MDs in boardrooms in an investment bank.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Same question for each of you.
Yeah, I would say for me, it's one thing I kind of fell into as well, relatively young, was this idea of being a thought leader. Mm-hmm. So I know now everyone can post really long threads on LinkedIn and Instagram and use social media and Twitter and use social media to get your name out there. But when I started out, it was, how do I write articles for certain newspapers or certain blogs where I knew some of the most influential people in the spaces I want to be in were at, and how could I demonstrate that I was quite unique in my perspectives and my reflections. And the more I wrote for these publications, the more folks would come to me. And so I think there was a lot of power in demonstrating that I was an expert in the field. Yep. And then also, there aren't many people that bluntly look like me and share my perspectives in the world, some of the worlds I'm in. And so, trying to be that unique person, and at the same time recognizing that I don't always want to be that person. Yep. When I went to Down Street, people say, "Oh, what does success look like?" And I say, "Well, success looks like there are more people like me there by the time I leave. If all people say is, Samuel, you were there, then I've basically been a failure, right?" So having that ability to be unique, but at the same time recognizing you have a responsibility to open the door and bring other people into the tent is something that, for me, was very important.
Brilliant, thank you. Same question again.
Let's answer this quickly. So I would say for me, a moment was probably back in 2012. So when I launched the Kenny Report back then, I would say for me, that was definitely a unique moment to show my difference, because it was literally a year after essentially coming out of prison, being acquitted for various crimes. And so essentially for me, at that moment there, the reason why I was so different, because I was 18, 19, launching this report in the House of Commons, talking about different issues affecting my community. And the reason why I took the report route was that a lot of young people, they focus so much on, how do I put this in video? How do I put this in other forms? But I thought to myself, a lot of what these researchers, think tanks, professors are doing, I feel like I can actually do this. And when I first put forward the idea, I was told that, oh, this should just be a blog. I was like, no, this needs to be a report. And so I got one of the top criminologists at the time to support me and help me to understand how do I write this. I took to the language so politicians and decision makers can understand. And from there, for me, a lot of life changed and shifted. However, I think the key thing in that lesson is learning the importance of creativity, right? Actually understanding what are people really not doing. A lot of times we're looking to just follow fashion. We feel like because this person done it, this means I can do it. It does, but also doesn't mean that needs to be the thing that you go and do. Sure. And so we need to really learn, like, what can we do that's different? And for me, being 18, 19, doing a report was extremely weird. It's still weird now. It's still, however, like, that's a whole open market that put me out there. So I feel like when you have these ideas as well, don't just share them with silly people that kill them. You just need to run with it.
Okay. Earlier, we were having a quick discussion upstairs when we first met, and one of the topics that really made me laugh was this idea of when you are one of the few black people in a space, you almost kind of represent the entirety of black culture on the planet. And you have to educate people on, well, sometimes you get drawn into conversations educating other people on black culture or black people, whatever that means. And I'm just keen to get your sort of thoughts now on how willing are you to even start doing that? Because in my experience, it's exhausting. Samuel, do you want to go?
Yeah, look, I'm black. No, but I grew up in Barnet. I have a surname that makes people think I'm Kenyan if they're from Kenya, because there's a place in Kenya that sounds like my surname. My hair wasn't always like this, but people usually think I'm Caribbean. So yeah, I'm very comfortable in my skin, but I also recognize that when you go into a space, unfortunately, you do tend to represent everyone, even though technically, well, not technically, definitely we're all different, right? And so there's a fine balance you have to strike between saying, yeah, I'm very comfortable in my skin. I love the fact that I love my heritage, but at the same time, I'm not going to try and fit into your stereotype.
Yep.
And so I don't have to speak a certain way. I don't have to, dare I say, have the same politics as everybody. I can be myself, and it's okay. And I think when you go into some spaces, yeah, there is that balance to be struck. But also, I would say there's a lot of good things that black people bring: energy, vibrancy, color, fun. And so actually just bring that to the table, because again, it's a fantastically unique way for you to also stand out, particularly in some environments where there's a lot of things that are quite, monolithic and tired, right?
Yeah, I think that the only thing I'll add to what Samuel has just said is just learn very quickly to understand the difference between informing and educating. And I'm going to use an example from something I do in my spare time, which is producing music and working with gospel choirs. They were trying to sing an African song, and this was an largely white choir, and obviously they were pronouncing the words wrong. So the choir conductor was basically talking to them and telling them, yeah, sing this way. And I was playing the keys, and I was like, no, I have to say something about this. So I stood up and I basically said to them two things. First of all, African languages are all vowel-based. The English language is A-E-I-O-U. African language is A-E-I-O-U. Right? So that made a big difference. Now, I've informed them. I start educating them when they ask why. Then I say, right, the words that you're singing mean this. That is why we accentuate certain words to bring more meaning. So that's why I'm saying understand the difference between informing and educating. You can inform, but the invitation to educate only comes when someone engages with the information you're giving.
It's a fantastic point. I just want to take the opportunity to open the room up to questions. Are there any questions in the audience?
Yeah, so we have a few questions here for you guys. So on the topic of difference, do any of you on the panel have experience dealing with neurodiverse individuals? And are there any remarks on how they can use their potential to their best?
Okay. Okay. So in a previous role that I had before the role I'm in, the company I was working with had in one of their commission statements to create opportunities for individuals who are on the neurodiverse spectrum. And I think that it's a two-sided thing. So it's about, especially if you're in a place of leadership, is empowering people to have the space to be able to show up as their full selves. That's one aspect. The other aspect then is for the individual to feel comfortable to be themselves without feeling like they're going to be othered or compared or judged. there was one guy I remember he was a really good coder, who he was building all sorts of apps and really fantastic, but he was socially awkward. So I made sure that I didn't basically put pressure on him to speak up during team meetings, and the team understood that he was on the neurodiverse spectrum. So they understood to treat him with the kind of respect and care that is required for that a person with that kind of situation, basically. So I think it's a two-way thing. As a leader, you have to create the environment, and that then empowers the individual to show up, but then the team also need to be accepting.
Thank you. And we have a final question. Has being different ever held you back in your career? And have any of you ever quit a job or a position because of those differences?
Good question.
You've quit a job. Where's the safe space?
What was the first part?
So has being different ever held you back in your career? And have you ever quit a job as a consequence of your difference?
Yeah, I'm sure being different probably held me back. Sometimes things go unsaid, and so, you know, I'm sure that is the case. But having said that, obviously I've been able to, I guess, experience and achieve some things that many people from all backgrounds haven't had the opportunity to do. And the last thing about quitting, well, Kenny, why did you point at me? I've quit a job. Yeah. I quit a job and it ended up in some newspapers. It was very awkward. Yeah, I mean, I would just say the important thing is to know where your red lines are, you know, and what are the things that you're unwilling to compromise on. And so, you know, I'm very passionate about my background and people from underrepresented backgrounds being able to progress. And although in an environment like politics, you have to understand that there are moments where you have to compromise. You're not always going to have your way in a functioning democracy, but you have to have your red lines. And you know, politics is a marathon and not a sprint. So sometimes you're going to have to vacate the stage, knowing that your time will probably come again. So that doesn't answer the question, but I feel like, Kenny, do you want me to?
That's helpful.
Okay.
I've got one more question for you, Samuel. I heard on the grapevine you've written a book. Can't remember the title. But it'd be useful for you to give us some insights, please.
Oh, yeah, my book, yeah, The Power of the Outsider. So, yeah, I worked in down the street when I left. So some of the things I was responsible for was, and not everybody is going to love this, vaccine deployment. So I was the guy number 10 who had the job of saying, look, everyone, the vaccine is universal, but not everybody is keen on it, right? In fact, people I mean in particular were amongst the less keen. And we needed to get to a point where 75% of the whole country was able to get this thing. So my job was to say, how are we going to deploy this in 6 months? That was my last operation. I'm trying to fix the Home Office after the Windrush scandal. Like all of the easy stuff was basically the stuff I was responsible for. But when I left, I thought, well, because for all these reasons, you're an outsider in this environment, and you have like a moral duty to try and firstly tell people all the things that they want to know and answer the questions they have, but also try and create this blueprint for other people that might end up in an environment, not necessarily down the street, where they are the first or one of few. So I wrote the book, The Power of the Outsider. It's not just my story, it's about a dozen really fascinating people. You know, when Harry and Meghan, when they got married, remember there was a guy who played the cello? Mm-hmm. So Sheku, he's part of a family of 7 classically trained, world-class musicians, all under the age of 25 when I went to meet his family. They were in the book, former chairman of Sainsbury's, and Sainsbury's was one of the sponsors in the book. And it really, hopefully, it's something that will help to change people's lives. So, you know, Amazon, Waterstones, grab a copy. Most of the money goes to the publisher, so I'm not just saying that because I want you to pay my bills.
So I think we're close to wrapping up now. I just want to give each of you, I say 30 seconds, but you're all talkers, so we'll see what happens. Just to leave the audience with, you know, a lasting sentiment, something you think is really important for them to take away and think on.
I'll start. There's one thing I really want everyone to think about and reflect on. I'll just say just the importance of understanding that on this journey of leadership, actually that more than anything in terms of the skills and what we discussed today, which is very important, is actually your character and the work you're doing on self. And for me, when we're talking about what makes you a powerful, well, the power of the outsider is actually a lot to do with how much you understand yourself. Many of us are consumed and we understand other people, celebrities, influencers more than we understand ourselves. It's a very scary and dangerous time. So a lot of people know a lot about what other people will think, their feelings, what they will say, their vision, their purpose, but you don't know your own.
It's a fantastic point. And
I guess I would just say, and the premise of the message I'm going to be taking across the country and the world over the next six to 12 months is, everybody has a value that they bring. And the biggest disservice is for you to try and do what somebody else is supposed to do. Be yourself, and your time will always come. And I guess it's easy for me to say it because I'm a student of political history, but in life, if you read anyone's book that has achieved anything unique and special, you know that there's times when they're in the wilderness, but there will always come a time when you are needed. And when that time comes, make sure you're prepared and make sure you're true to yourself.
fantastic. And Carl, you to close.
Mine is along the same themes, and it's something I mentioned earlier, is understand there's only one of you. There'll only ever be one of you. So make the time that you have count and don't sell yourself short, because you matter, and there is a unique space in this world that only you can fill. So don't shy away from taking the opportunities that come your way and disqualify yourself because of someone else's opinion or stereotype or thought about what you can and cannot achieve. After all, the power of choice is yours. You're the one who has the power to control your personal brand. And on that, I'll leave you with two things. With personal brand, integrity. Integrity always wins the day. Yeah. Number two is, what do you want to be famous for? That's what people will think about in terms of your hard skills. But the more important thing is, what do people say about you when you're not in the room? That's the thing that will last. So just keep on working on that and embrace yourself.
What's a wonderful sentiment to end on. Please give our panel a round of applause. Thank you.